Hi, my name is Erik Forman. I'm a teacher in the Bronx, New York, which means that I teach in the largest public school system in the United States, the New York City Public Schools. I'm an ESL teacher, that's English as a second language, in high school. We have a slogan in our union. We're all members of the United Federation of Teachers, which is local of the American Federation of Teachers. We have a slogan, teachers want what students need, or another slogan, our working conditions are students' learning conditions. The main struggle that teachers have is a struggle for better schools for students. For us, that means smaller class sizes, more support for students with special needs, enough time to prepare for our classes, and the freedom to use our professional judgment in the classroom so that we can do our jobs and help students learn. We're in the midst, as you probably gathered from the news, we're in the midst of a fairly major crisis here, not just, which for us in the public schools is not just about Trump, but about several decades now of changes which have tried to impose corporate-style management on the public school system with catastrophic consequences for just about everybody. So currently in New York, which is one place where this experiment has gone forward, there's an artificial market that was created by the city where students supposedly get a choice between schools, and schools are supposed to compete with each other. Companies are competing for shareholder dollars by producing profit. They're competing for customer dollars by selling a product. In the public school system, that kind of market didn't exist, and so the city, under the influence of Wall Street types, decided it had to create that kind of system. So the way this is done is through competition over an artificial currency, which is test scores. Schools are evaluated based mostly on their test scores. There's a few other factors, but test scores are the main one. These are standardized tests, and students, well, the choice is somewhat illusory because basically all the schools are selling the same, more or less, product, which is a very stripped down curriculum, large class sizes, and a strong focus on standardized tests, because if schools don't get, if a lot of students don't pass these standardized tests, schools come under increased scrutiny, they come under increased pressure, and then often they are in fact closed, as if, in the manner like when a business goes out of business. So this puts a huge amount of pressure on administrators to prevent their business from being taken over by the city and then closed. And introduces an incredible level of stress in the lives of students and teachers. It turns the schools into testing factories. There's been a lot of decades of research that shows that virtually every single the problem with standardized testing is that we don't have standardized students. Students come from widely different backgrounds and all have widely different needs. And so to be forced to take the same exams, to force everyone to take the same exact exams, and have the same exact curriculum simply doesn't meet their needs. Think of a concrete example. I've been teaching at a high school for recent immigrants where the students arrive literally in 9th grade, 10th grade, or 11th grade and are supposed to pass the same number of standardized tests, mostly in English, after being instructed in English, which is a language that they often don't speak when they first arrive in the country, as native-born students. So you have students who sit through for 6-8 hours, struggle through these standardized tests, and of course, a large number of them don't pass. The graduation rate is 35% for English language learners across the city. It's about 65-70% on average overall. So instead of providing what immigrant students need, they're forced into this test-taking machine. The focus on that edges out social-emotional learning, the arts, music, foreign languages. Anything that isn't tested gets cut or is neglected. Teachers end up working these 70-hour work weeks in order to prepare students for tests. There isn't often appropriate curriculum, so we have to make it from scratch. And it leads towards micromanagement and standardized teaching. Standardized testing leads to standardized teaching in the classroom. And so we see our job being increasingly deprofessionalized, which is in line with reforms that have been made in other sectors where Wall Street has taken an active role in management. On top of all this, administrators are incentivized to reduce labor costs. The school gets a set labor budget, regardless of how, if you have 10 teachers who've all been teaching for a decade or 10 new teachers, you get the same labor budget. And so what this means is that administrators are incentivized to try to push out older teachers, teachers with tenure, teachers with seniority, teachers making a little bit more money. And so they'll use the evaluation system often to pressure them out. On the other side, for younger teachers, the flip side of this is that administrators are not granting tenure, which means that we have a 4-year probationary period in New York City right now, for New York State for teachers as a result of corporate pressure on the school system, which means you can be fired for no reason at any time, like an at-will employee in the private sector. So the result is that teachers in the first 4 years of your career are under extreme pressure to, when they say jump, you have to say how high, of course. If you see something that's happening that might not be legal, you feel like you can't speak out. Even the union, the United Federation of Teachers, tells teachers who don't have tenure not to get involved in the union. Well, a union that has no involvement has no strength. And so, of course, our contractual rights often go unenforced. And many of us are organizing to change this. I'm a member of a group called the Movement of Rank and File Educators. We're trying to do something about that, but we're not really there yet. So around 50% of new teachers quit before their 5th year. It's becoming a high turnover occupation. All of this disproportionately affects students of color and communities of color. In the United States, schools are funded by property taxes. So in communities that have more money, which tend to be more white, there are better schools, smaller classes, and teachers know this. The holy grail of the teaching occupation is to somehow get a job out in the suburbs. That's what a lot of teachers aspire to. Where it's widely known these jobs are much easier because you have a much lower workload. I could say things about that, but and also there's a serious problem with racist hiring in the public schools, where you have a student body that's 85% students of color and a teaching workforce that's 70% white. And it's going in the wrong direction. It's getting whiter rather than getting more diverse. So the fight for quality schools is a fight against racism. It is a fight against white supremacy. The reason these things are done is because in our society, people have belief that students of color, people of color, don't deserve the same thing. There's a belief that they do not deserve the same things that white students have. They'll think it's okay to do things as students of color that white parents would never agree to allow to be done to their children. In terms of the testing, or in terms of the militarized environment inside the school system, for example, or the lack of extracurricular activities or enrichment opportunities, and so or dilapidated facilities, and so forth. So it's a fight against racism. It's also a fight against the logic of Wall Street. And so in the UFT, we are organizing and we are fighting back, not just for ourselves, but for the communities that we live in and that we're a part of. And that's the value of teacher unionism, and why we have to fight to keep our unions strong. With the election of Donald Trump, all this is going to get much worse, of course. The Republicans are pushing through something they call right to work, which means the right to opt out of paying union dues if you are in a unionized shop. Right now, if you're a teacher in New York, you have to pay money to the union, either union dues if you join and then you can vote and participate, or if you don't want to join, you have to pay something called an agency fee, which is the same amount to pay for the operation of the union. Right to work would take that away, and so teachers who don't understand why it's important to be in a union would leave, which would be catastrophic. So, and would mean that our working conditions would continue to deteriorate. So what I hope for is that in the coming years that we relearn the power of solidarity and the need for solidarity in our schools and in our communities, because we have no one to rely on but each other.